Hello detectives, it looks like yet another case from the genre of battle royales today. At least, well, sort of. The world of PvPvE coopetition, which kind of looks like a BR with AI. What if you borrowed some elements from Halo 5's Warzone PvPvE mode and had an actual emphasis on surviving as a part of the gameplay, the scavenging if you will? Well, that sort of was the idea behind Scavengers, at least on the surface. Under the hood was a powerful and proprietary server cloud technology spatial OS, created and powered by a billion-dollar tech startup company, Improbable Worlds. A map would be possible to have hundreds, maybe even thousands of live actors, aka a mixture of players and AI NPCs sprawled throughout. Backed by the former 343 studio lead and creative director on Halo 4, Midwinter Entertainment developed and then launched Scavengers March 2021. While Scavengers was able to garner a large initial population, it quickly lost such over the course of a year, and as of the summer of 2021, Scavengers is doing worse than ever. While the game isn't dead in the water quite yet, it is exhibiting little signs of changing its fortune, and has shown many of the same signs we have identified in Anthem pre-death and other similar titles. Behind the more typical story of a failed online free-to-play shooter though, lies an even more interesting story of intrigue involving billionaires, military contracts, and an apparent world-changing technology meant to emulate the very Matrix itself. What went wrong with what was supposed to be a showcase for the spatial OS platform and Scavengers? On this episode of Death of a Game, we will diagnose the largest contributing reasons for the death of a game, Scavengers, and stay tuned near the end for the final deduction where we break down all of the evidence and put the case to bed. And at the very end of the video, a hint about what the next Death of a Game will be about. Let's get to scavenging, detectives. Hello detectives, I'm excited to introduce the first video game sponsor on the channel, Legends of Idleon, created by a solo creator, Lava Flame 2. Legends of Idleon, as the name implies, is a idling-based online RPG. In Idleon, you can level up and train multiple characters and have them work for you while you're AFK. This eliminates the need for constant second-to-second involvement in a MorpG format that is similar to other titans in the space such as MapleStory or RuneScape. In fact, Legends of Idleon is kind of like RuneScape and MapleStory having a baby, but with more of a quirky indie feel that oozes personality at times. More AFK than RuneScape, but less active than MapleStory. With 9 skills, 38 classes, and over 600 unique skills to choose from, there's an awful lot of ways to play Legends of Idleon. Best of all, it requires way less input than those aforementioned games, so it's a perfect game to play while you're at work or writing like myself, or whatever else you do to keep you busy on one window or one monitor. Legends of Idleon has scored a very positive score on Steam and is free to play, so what are you waiting for? Give it a try if it's piqued your interest. The game is still in early access, so it still has time to improve. There's also a limited time summer event active, so now's a great time to get started. Thanks again to Legends of Idleon for sponsoring this video. The story starts back in 2012, upon the founding of the company that would design the innovative technology behind what would become Scavengers. Founded in 2012 by 2 Cambridge grads and backed by 20 million in venture capital funding, Improbable Worlds is a software developer from the UK who has created a technology and thus platform to change the very world of online video games. Not just video games though, but aspirations of changing the very fabric of our society with the introduction of technologies capable of handling virtual worlds. Technology that would soon birth the very topic of this video. Improbable sometime in December 2016 would strike a deal with Google to join forces on their proprietary technology, Spatial OS. Spatial OS was a cloud computing service for building virtual worlds that would run on top of Google's cloud platform. This would allow Google and those using Spatial OS to achieve unprecedented complexity and scale. The limit of what the technology was capable of wasn't just video games either. That limitless potential is the perfect kind that gets investors all kinds of swarming like sharks smelling blood in the water. But that was merely the beginning. Improbable had high hopes, becoming in November 2017, thanks to new venture capital funding, the latest UK billion-dollar tech startup company. This article from Wired showcases how serious Improbable was about their goals for simulation, ultimately leading to what the co-founder and CEO of the company, Herman Narula, would joke was the Matrix. Herman was born in Delhi to a billionaire father, Harpinder's son Narula, a construction magnate. Herman would go to Cambridge where he would meet the other founder Rob Whitehead and founded Improbable Worlds. Most impressively showcasing their spatial OS technology, Improbable would create a simulation of the city of Cambridge itself, the most complex of its kind ever created. With a talented inner circle including former Fortune 500 alumni and $1 billion in startup capital, Improbable was trying to really flex their technology in the world of online video games. Improbable's spatial OS would be showcased under the first title to use the technology, Bosa Studios' Worlds Adrift, a title that unfortunately will have its very own Death of a Game episode. Worlds Adrift was a procedurally generated open-world game where you set out to explore this vast world with the creation and use of your own custom ship, and did battle for booty. Worlds Adrift wasn't the only game promising to take advantage of this revolutionary technology though. Enter Midwinter Entertainment, formed by Farmville vets and led by a former 343 studio head and the Halo 4 creative lead, Josh Holmes. Few details were shown about the newly announced title spearheaded by Midwinter Entertainment and powered by Spatial OS, titled Scavengers. Scavengers was where teams of 3 attempted to survive and, as the name implies, scavenge resources and try to make it to the end of the game. Despite not being explicitly introduced as a battle royale by Midwinter Entertainment, Scavengers was showcasing all of the markings of being some sort of BR. Unlike most battle royales, however, Scavengers had never before seen used mass AI systems that could potentially shake the scene up. Alpha signups for Scavengers would go live December 7th, 2018. In January 2019, Improbable and Unity had a big fight in public concerning the terms of service. Improbable told the story like suddenly the rug was pulled out from underneath them. Meanwhile, Unity maintained that they had given them ample warning a year prior. It's impossible to note who ultimately is telling the truth, with none of this going public, but Herman Narula, the CEO of Improbable, stated that he thought Unity was doing this as a means of negotiation or an accident. Tim Sweeney of Epic Games rallied behind Improbable and set up a $25 million fund to help the developers transition to more open engines, services, and ecosystems, aka yoink. Talk about a great way of getting new clients, right? I'm not quite sure if Scavengers was ever being developed in Unity, but there is a possibility, of course. That would mean from this point on there was a migration from Unity to Unreal Engine, as that engine would be the engine that Scavengers would later launch on. Alpha gameplay was showcased June 2019 for Scavengers. The game was showcased from a third-person, over-the-shoulder viewpoint, with a focus on shooting and killing horde-like mobs. Melee gameplay was also showcased, which was rather rare in most battle royales, described as a player versus environment versus player coopetition shooter. The gameplay was raw, but considering it was supposed to be alpha gameplay, there was still enough to be optimistic. Critics published their impressions concerning Scavengers in alpha. IGN stated it was shaping up to be a highly compelling player versus environment versus player genre mashup that is well on track to being greater than the sum of its obvious parts. You choose from different heroes forming a 3-person team, and matches took place over the course of 30 minutes or so on average, where you began each match by scavenging resources and weapons, and finish the map by escaping via dropship with all your loot, at least hopefully. Polygon, on the other hand, was also positive, but specifically regarding Scavengers tackling an issue prevalent in many BRs according to Polygon: pacing issues. With NPCs to battle and a larger focus on non-combat tasks such as scavenging, this could theoretically solve the issue of pacing. While these impressions were taken from watching and playing in limited alpha testing, Scavengers was seemingly impressing the critics. Improbable, in a shocking turn of events to many in the public eye, would acquire Scavengers developer Midwinter Entertainment September 2019. It's at this time that it's noted that Midwinter had 30 people on their development team. Meanwhile, Improbable had a whopping 350 in their company. I've been hugely excited by Midwinter and Scavengers since the first time I talked to Josh. This is unquestionably good news. The acquisition is unrelated to other projects by other development studios. The Midwinter acquisition is the result of long-running and mutually beneficial partnership between Improbable and Midwinter. Midwinter would retain creative control, but would now be owned by Improbable. The acquisition was sold as positive for Midwinter, and thus Scavengers, but some including the article showcased on screen were interpreting it in different ways. Both the studios behind Worlds Adrift had recently just shut down their title the last summer. Meanwhile, Mavericks, another spatial OS project, had also shut down. Maybe Improbable was trying to get ahead of another possible failure, to secure the technology or something more perhaps. Inevitably, the story of Scavengers is inexorably linked even more now with Improbable and their spatial OS technology. With 2019 in the books, 2020 was proving to be even worse of a year economically for the now parent company Improbable, as in March 2020 they announced that they had lost £63.7 million. Improbable stated in their defense it was due to their strategic focus on growth and introducing their technology to their newly acquired studios. Improbable, despite mounting heavy losses, having failed games and failing so far to match expectations, was still full steam ahead according to a spokesperson at their company. Improbable had some impressive technology, but not a whole lot to show yet regarding the initial and ongoing expectations, really. Backed by a bank or not, they were going to need some level of success in the world of video games to be taken seriously there as a platform. The pressure was mounting. Unless they were banking, no pun intended, on acquiring other developers as a strategy and licensing their products out to them to use, but that would remain to be seen. More details on Scavengers would be released November 2020, including how in essence the game was basically a playoff of the Warzone mode in Halo 5, a PvPvE mode that many although enjoyed, including myself, was plagued with a pay-to-win grade system that gave you better weapons and vehicles, and some sort of card rarity mechanic. I have to say though, with the screen showcased at the time, the game looked rather generic. Like, we get it, it's an Arctic survival angle with a bit of Horizon Zero Dawn and The Division going on, but nothing was striking about the art style, and the monsters lacked variety and looked rather run-of-the-mill for such a game. Scavengers was seemingly relying heavily on the gameplay and the technology itself to wow the crowd, as it was barely distinguishable otherwise from other similar style survivor shooters. Midwinter would announce a closed beta for Scavengers December 10th, 2020, allowing for up to 50,000 players. By the start of 2021, Improbable had already mounted $88.5 million in losses concerning their efforts on virtual worlds specifically. So far, their ventures into gaming hadn't really been fruitful, and this is kind of expected when you're trying to pioneer a new, never-before-seen technology, but it wasn't looking good. The good thing is that Improbable wasn't just relying on Midwinter Entertainment or Scavengers, with contracts signed with the UK and US Departments of Defense concerning their wargaming software. Who knows how big these contracts actually were, but they could have been very lucrative. They are government contracts, but with yet more losses detailed, they eventually are going to run out of money, right? Eurogamer had positive first impressions April 26, 2021 concerning Scavengers, but were understandably worried about the prospect of being able to pay to unlock characters. More interestingly, they pointed out that Scavengers was set to launch in early access with no real money transactions yet, but they were supposed to be coming later with an account wipe. PC Gamer was calling Scavengers the next surprise hit of 2021. GamesIndustry.biz exclaimed that Scavengers was a showcase for Midwinter and Spatial OS. Meanwhile, VentureBeat more boldly claimed that Improbable was banking on Midwinter's Scavengers to prove its game platform. Hype was at an all-time high starting the summer of 2021, with Scavengers finally scheduled to launch in early access May 1st, 2021. Improbable had gone from 300 employees to 450, and now a whopping 950. If Scavengers didn't perform well enough, would Improbable give Midwinter another chance due to the scale of their now current operations as a company and amount of risk they put on them in the first place? Scavengers, developed by Midwinter Entertainment using Spatial OS technology and the Unreal Engine, would launch May 1st, 2021 in early access. Because this was an early access launch, the game is largely shielded from criticism, as Metacritic and other websites don't actually show the game when it's rated as such. But according to 7,300 reviews of the game on Steam, the game was rated at a low 56%, with the player base peaking at 16,700 players on Steam. As PC Gamer highlighted, the player response to the game was divided. For starters, 48 hours into the release of the game, Scavengers was already plagued by apparent hackers ruining other players' experiences. Other responses were far more negative, and overall worrying for the future of Scavengers. A prominent issue players couldn't ignore, as it was right there in the core design, was the game being a linear power progression. That meant that after players acquired better gear, weapons, and loadouts, they were able to use that advantage to continuously acquire more advantages in a rather direct power manner. This wouldn't be nearly as bad if more players on the map were able to escape with their loot. But as many players on Steam had highlighted, most of the impactful gameplay happened in the last 5 minutes of the game of Scavengers. The portion where you had to flee and leave with your loot was the single most important part of the game. There was no partial credit here either. Either you got out, got your gear, or not. This made the game design zero-sum, a certified no-no in game design. You have to allow your newer players to not just get plastered across the cement, or the Arctic in this case. Couple that with players having advantages from being further leveled, and the same players are the ones continuously escaping and getting even more powerful. But that's not the end of the game's issues. On top of this, there was the research system, which was a system where you gathered resources and chose things that you wanted to research and unlock. It was limited in the game unless you spent money to speed the progression. Cries of gacha games and mobile game monetization woes echoed the Steam boards, as Scavengers effectively has a built-in mechanic for limiting the speed of research. For a free-to-play PC shooter, this was a controversial way to design or monetize the game. Maybe they really did learn from Halo 5's Warzone. Typically, gun skill related players who are often attracted to BR style games don't like the idea of others having an innate advantage upon spawning onto the map, and that kind of goes against the essence of playing a BR in the first place, really. Which is fair, because Scavengers isn't really a BR, but it looked like one, it played like one, it quacked like one, so on and so forth. That perception, which is key in game design, was causing some internal bleeding for the new title. A genre known for spawning with nothing and having to grab what you can is integral to playing a BR, but Scavengers had that and a linear power progression system on top of it, which was proving to be a recipe for disaster for player retention. Scavengers needed to do a better job of separating their game perception-wise from that of a battle royale if they didn't want to play by the same genre rules or market standards. But wait, there's more. Remember how the game didn't have microtransactions before it launched in EA, and they were going to wipe it after, and then launch with them? Well, they didn't wipe progress for closed beta players, so players had already been playing the game and accruing advantages and got to keep those advantages whenever the game launched in early access. These kinds of issues weren't just simple ones to sweep under the rug, they were causing serious retention issues for the new PvPvE shooter. One was integral to how the game was designed and monetized, which means that they were very aware it could have been controversial as a mechanic in the first place, as they had other models to base it off of. The other issue soured the community around Scavengers just period, which like a skunk in the wild produces a certain stench that gamers just start to avoid. Deplorable or shady business strategies aren't that non-typical anymore, unfortunately. However, it's more of an issue of feeling like goodwill was betrayed. Trust betrayed. Even if Midwinter could bring their game around in other ways to reduce criticism and improve, would there be any fans left willing to trust them to wait or do such in the first place? A mere week later, the peak population on Steam dropped to 6,187 players. A mere 1 month after the EA launch of Scavengers, and you have the peak population already down to a low of 2,887 players. Scavengers a mere month after the launch was already severely faltering, as the holes were too apparent for the sinking ship. Meanwhile, Midwinter was testing the technology used in Scavengers, this time with players, 4,000 of them. You heard that right. Midwinter had the ScavLab sandbox test, showcasing that Improbable's spatial OS technology, front and center, was capable of putting 4,000 players in the same instance. These were very impressive numbers and proved that the technology that had been boasted all of these years was capable of doing great things, but was it capable of creating a great video game that could last? And not to say that the technology itself was to blame, well, sort of. What if the grand expectations that come with making a spatial OS game, which to be fair were set by Improbable themselves to get funding, were causing undue stress on the future video game projects to employ spatial OS or be acquired by Improbable? While Spatial OS's usage in Scavengers was impressing people, the game itself wasn't really, and the population by June 26th had dropped to a mere 800 peak players with an average player base of 492. While Midwinter or Improbable hasn't pulled the plug yet on Scavengers as of the summer of 2021, they might not have a choice with how things are looking lately. While Scavengers is still in early access, how would an official launch curb any of the issues that we have outlined so far? I don't think they would. The issues that Scavengers are facing regarding a linear progression system constricted by a mobile, free-to-play, pay-to-win monetization method, a monetization method that's baked into the very design of the online game, especially a free-to-play game, they can't just suddenly pivot to another strategy, because they don't have that kind of game to do that. They can't just start making costumes and monetize that way. But I feel we've already covered the major reasons thus far concerning the death of Scavengers, and you know what that means, detectives. Hit the music, Tom. A flawed zero-sum game design with a linear power progression system. Closed beta players kept their progression. It cost real money to speed the progress of crafting, and that was the only way you could speed it. Hackers, botters, and glitchers ruined the fun for many. A soulless, mediocre video game. Improbable's grand spatial OS expectations. What will Midwinter do with Scavengers, or shall I say, Improbable? After the acquisition, Midwinter's identity seemed to sort of merge into their new parent companies, which is kinda typical. Again, Scavengers isn't dead yet, but with the last serious update on Steam mentioned being from back in April concerning the closed beta, and no new significant update or communication regarding the status of the game, it's looking like it's pretty likely they're going to pull the plug on the game. So we have the very abrupt end of the story of a PvPvE free-to-play shooter that was supposed to shake up the scene. In the end, what is the most memorable thing about Scavengers? The spatial OS technology and the Scavenger tech built around such. The game in the end feels like one giant expensive tech demo meant to attract future investors. Scavengers lacked a soul, and that's not something you can suddenly scavenge after the fact. Scavengers might be remembered for being capable of putting thousands of players and NPCs on the same map, which is certainly impressive, but there's probably not going to be a whole lot else it will be remembered for besides just the frustration it caused. Thanks for watching, guys.
To think the realm calls this war.